Good morning, everyone. So my name's Still McCarthy. I'm a lead engineer at Managed Group in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm here today to talk to you about GitHub Copilot and is it only for developers? So, so bit of introduction about who I am and why I'm talking about this. Uh, Lead engineer at Managed Group, so a consulting firm in Australia. I primarily focused on platform engineering, DevOps, and DevX or Dev Experience in the Microsoft domain. I started off as a .NET developer, so I started just writing pretty basic code, just creating with SQL Server, and then asked where does code get deployed, and it all streamed up from there. And now I do all this stuff. Uh, and I'm just an all-round tech enthusiast, passion for AI and emergent technologies. So for today's session, we're going to be talking about GitHub Copilot. And rather than me trying to come up with some kind of fancy way of describing it, I thought the best way to get a description of what it is to ask it itself. So when I ask the tool, it says GitHub Copilot is an AI-powered code completion tool. It's designed to assist developers by providing suggestions for whole lines or blocks of code as they type, and it works directly in the editor, helping you test out new ideas, write code more efficiently, and learn new APIs or languages on the go. Now, it does say developer there, but I'm going to challenge that a bit as we go on today to really get people to think about how this tool can be used for more than just developers, but for kind of anyone in tech that has some kind of they have to do some configuration or they've got to work with files, APIs, work with different things like Bash script, PowerShell, things like that. But first, maybe we should actually talk about how the tool works and what it really does. So GitHub Copilot here, it's a tie between your IDE or kind of your tool that you use to interrogate code and work with text files, in this case, Visual Studio Code, and a large language model. So that large language model that's being run by GitHub was trained on public data, so that's including all the data that is existing in the GitHub public repositories. So all the code that exists there, they've trained a large language model on that code, and then that large language model is what actually Copilot, the plugin, uses to help provide those suggestions. So it takes context, which is generally you'll select some text or you'll tell it to look at a file. It'll pull that information in as its context, send that off to the large language model and ask for a suggestion. And that suggestion will come back. And this could either be a suggestion in the form of an inline piece of code or an inline piece of text, or it could even be using the chat interface to have like that back and forth like you would have with ChatGPT, where you're asking it questions and you're saying, I have a problem, how do I solve this? And it's that kind of collaborative uh, session there. So, is this tool only for developers? And I'm going to say no, it's not. It's definitely a tool that everyone in technology can use. And what I'm going to show you today is how we use that tool in kind of more of a platform engineering concept. So let's think of a platform engineer. What does a platform engineer do? So platform engineers write CI/CD pipelines. They do infrastructure as code. They look at error messages in logs, and they need to use the CLI. So these are all things that we can actually do. And rather than me just sit here and actually tell you about it, what I'm going to do is actually show you what that looks like. So I will just bounce my screen for a second. Let's just do this. And we'll bounce this back up. Let's come back up. Okay, there we go. So we can see there's no strings attached. I definitely am live and going through this. All right. wait for that screen to change over to my Visual Studio Code if it wants to, or is it going to just stay on that screen? So apologies, it looks like it's too early in the morning for it. So let me just
It's all good,
share.
mate. I think we can see your screen. So if you present again.
Yep, just going to re-present that. There we go. That looks better.
So it is.
All right, cool. So what I have here is it's a pretty basic repository. It's something that a application developer would give you and say, hey, my application lives in here. And I need you to go and do things like set up CI/CD, set up some infrastructure as code, things like that. So we can see here, I've already got an infrastructure folder and I've got some bicep here. So we're deploying this application to a Azure App Service. So I've got some pretty basic bicep here, but let's consider this now from the point of view of I'm a junior engineer. I may not have the best grasp on what bicep is, what it's doing. So maybe what I want to do here is actually start asking some questions. So we'll pop open GitHub Copilot here as the plugin. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start asking some questions. Say, okay, I'm going to select this piece of code. And I'm going to ask Copilot, what does this do? And so Copilot here is going to take in that context. And so now it's giving me the answer saying, this is a bicep file, which is a domain-specific language, or DSL, for deploying Azure resources declaratively. So it says it's an abstraction over Azure Resource Manager ARM and ARM templates. And the good thing here is, while maybe as a more senior engineer, you'll know this, as a junior engineer, this is information that's really valuable. This is stuff that's helping you learn. So now we're going to say, actually, what is the selected code? And it's going to take us piece by piece. It says, okay, this line here is declaring a new resource type. It tells us about the API version that it's using, breaks down what the parameters are, and then just gives you a nice summary saying this is something you use to define a app service plan. And again, we could do the same thing. Go, okay, I understand that. And so, what about the next code? And again, because we have the code selected, this is how we're kind of prompting the tool to say, hey, this is the information that I kind of want to know. And again, it breaks this down and gives us this nice section here. And then what we could say is, oh, okay, they also wanted something like a key vault. Also, before it turns out, Copilot likes to jump into my demos, and it's suggested here, hey, maybe you want an output to this file. So it's given me an inline suggestion. And again, this isn't programming code as such. This is not development. This is just the bicep script, like template language itself. And it already understands it enough to say, okay, I can give you an output, understand how to call this specific, or so this one app service, understand how to call that, get its properties, and get its output. So what I'm going to ask it here is, can you help me create a storage count? Let's say it would be a storage count with this. So, okay, it's understood that we're talking again about bicep. And it's gone ahead and said, okay, well, we'll need some more parameters here. And then we'll need set those parameters something. And then we're going to need this whole thing here. So let's go and grab that. So we'll grab it in bits. We'll grab the parameters first. And we'll just copy and we'll go stick these parameters up here. And then we'll grab the resource itself. So as you can see, again, well, senior developer, you're going to know this. You're just going to start typing it, and you'll be able to do that fine. But as a junior, you may not have known all the paths to talk to here. There is an important caveat here with doing this, though. The model is trained to a point in time, And what can happen sometimes is that if you talk to it about new resources, it's actually not going to understand, not going to know what to suggest. And it may also not suggest the right version if you want to use a newer version. So here we've got a 2021 version and here a 2020. If you use a newer version of the API to define your bicep, uh, it might not recognize that. And when asking for suggestions, it might also suggest older ones that are maybe depreciated. So this is a really important point around using these AI tools to help speed you up, but being aware of what they're writing and being aware of the information they're giving you back and understanding that context. So you should never really trust what it gives you back 100%. You should always look at it and go, is that the right API version? Am I getting the right thing here? Maybe I need to go cross-reference this with the documentation to make sure, yep, that's the one I want. So, but let's have a, and again, it's given us that output, but let's have a look at, for the more senior developers, what it actually does help you speed up. So if I start typing resource, and I'm going to go key vault, and I've got some tools installed to help me with this. So if I go Microsoft, and if I could spell in this morning, that would be good. Microsoft Key Vaults. So, but now it's also started to generate me a whole heap of code here. And I can just simply go, yep, that looks like what I'm doing. It's already grabbed the format of the naming conventions I've been using. And it understands how to get things like tenant IDs and all that. So I can simply press tab, and there we go. I have a key vault. So now it has filled in some object IDs and things like that, which we mostly will remove and say, yeah, it's not quite what I was looking for. But overall, in saving you time with what you're typing, that's where you start to see the speed up. It's not going to solve your big, heavy problems for you, but it will start to speed you up by doing that kind of really advanced autocomplete. So you can just go, yep, that's what I want. It understands all the rest of the code in my file, understands my naming conventions. I don't have to sit there and type them out, especially if you have slightly longer naming conventions. That could save you time, and just start hitting tab. But again, always check what it's written to see, does this make sense here? So we're not going to use this key vault for what we're doing here. So we'll leave that as those. So what we might need to do now is we've got our application and we've got our infra. Now, building a CI/CD pipeline, again, you might have to sit there and think about, well, what do I need to do that? Again, we can come into Copilot and say, I'd like to create a CI/CD pipeline for this project. Can you help create to deploy the structure first? So now I didn't actually tell it what file to look at. It's just taken that from that fact that this file is open in the browser, that, hey, maybe I'm talking about this file. So it's taken some of that context and it's given us here a breakdown of a GitHub workflow. So using GitHub Actions. So, and now it's saying, okay, I've got the CI/CD pipeline. I'm going to define the elements that are required here. So the job, so the build and deploy. And now what it's doing is it's also doing things like installing bicep CLI, compiling the bicep file, deploying that bicep file using an AZ deployment. So, and it's given us all of that kind of information. Now, there are many ways to do this, and what can happen is that sometimes Copilot's not going to do it the way that you kind of want to do it. For example, here it's doing the login to Azure step, and it says, okay, use this secrets.azure credentials. Now, I've set up my GitHub repository in a slightly different way, where I'm using OIDC to do that connection for me. So I don't actually have those Azure credentials. So I can ask it, can you update the workflow to use OIDC for the authentication to Azure? So, and again, it's going through, and so it's now done some things like it's added in these tokens here. So it's like permission tokens. It's still trying to use the Azure credentials, which I don't have. I have slightly different, but that's okay. But this is another way to do it. And it also still explains why it's made those changes, what changes they're having here. And it's also said, hey, can you please replace that group as well? So what we can do then is we can then use this and say, okay, well, let's say that looks fine. So I want to go and insert this into a new file. And so we can see here, it's actually just put all of that into a file for us. And now I can just save this, and we will go and save this as a pipeline. So what we actually have to do is, so one thing it hasn't done for us, to actually, let's do that before we go too far. Let's ask where this file should live. Again, we don't want to assume knowledge all the time, especially if we're talking to more juniors. So we can say, where should this pipeline file go? And now it's given us that detail. It said, okay, we place that file in a .github/workflows directory. So, and it's like, okay, great. Well, I don't have that. So, and rather than going through, it's like going through the file manager and creating stuff like that. Maybe what I want to do is ask, how would I create that using the terminal? And now we start to get into a section of using Copilot, not just for coding within a window or doing pipelines or doing bicep, but now we're starting to ask it about CLI commands. So there is another tool here, which is called GitHub Copilot for CLI. So I don't have that tool installed at the moment. I'm just kind of focusing on the plugin, but that tool is has been built to allow for you to actually call Copilot from the CLI and start doing some of these CLI commands without even needing Visual Studio Code open. It's a completely separate tool. And it can help, again, just speed things up where you can say, I'm trying to do this kind of thing. Can you give me a command? So we can see that we're in the command here, and I'll just expand my terminal a little bit. And we can see I'm in this directory here. So I can now just say, hey, go run that in the terminal for me. And there we go. We have created, if you wanted to show, so it's a dot file, so it didn't actually show up, but that's right. So we can still do GitHub, and we could now see that there is a workflows directory here. So now what we could do is we can go and save that file, and we can save that file in. Of course, it doesn't want to do that for me, so we'll move that file. Always the fun when it puts a hidden directory and then it doesn't want to show you it in the browser, which is why this is always generally better done by CLI. Okay, so we will now name this infra YAML, and then I'll just go ahead and move that into our workflows directory. I'll just move that. Great. All right, so we now have a pipeline infrastructure. So now this is again where we'll start to see some slight issues with Copilot and the way, sometimes the way it formats it, sometimes it's using things which are a bit out of date. So we can see the login here hasn't really done what we wanted to do. So what we can do here is remove that, and we've got the tenant ID. think we need its client ID. And we should be able to do that. And again, it's also that speed up component where it's found the secret, it's determined the pattern, and it's done that for us. So now what we can do is we've got our infra, but what about the application? So yeah, we may not have a development background, we may not understand how to do that. So what I'm going to do here is use the workspace command. And what this does is it allows us to interrogate all of the files within a workspace. And I can now ask, how would I create a pipeline to build the application of this project? So now what it's doing is it's going ahead, looking at the workspace structure and trying to find information which is relevant to the question we've asked. So going through, it's gathering that workspace information. And now it's talking about, okay, here's how you would do it. Again, giving you where the file would live. It's determined that we're doing .NET. It has determined it's saying we're using .NET version 5. Again, that's an incorrect. That it's using .NET 8, but .NET 8 didn't exist during the training time. So again, be aware of the training limits. And it's gone through and said, okay, you want to do dependencies, a build, and a test. So that's really giving us that base pipeline. It's also understood that maybe we want to make sure that we're doing pull requests as well as pushes to our main branch. So setting us up with a good practice on how we want to control the flow of how our pipelines trigger. So that's all good there. That gives us, again, that really solid foundation of we have a start point. We know that this is at least most of the way there, and we just have to go and adjust it to put that in. So let's just go and add that to a file. Oops, that inserted it in the middle, which we didn't want to do. So we go insert new file, and again, that's our build file there. So, and then what we can do is we can quickly ask it something like, if I needed to write a bash script to build this application, how would I do it? So, and again, now we're starting to ask questions which, again, are a bit more tangential. Now we're saying, hey, I want to do a bash script. And because to Copilot Bash is just another language, it's able to help us out by giving us that kind of basic bash scripting. So, and again, it breaks it down nice, easy, tells you what each of these commands are actually doing and how we can use them, what the point of using them is, and also says how we would save the file and what we need to do to the file to even be able to run it. So all these are, again, really good learning capabilities for more junior engineers. For more senior engineers, again, your advantage more comes from your speeding up if you're doing really complicated bash files or something and you just needed to explain some code for a legacy system, or you needed to kind of extend something and it's got a whole heap of pre-existing knowledge in the context and you just want it to autocomplete a lot of that. That's where you get a lot of advantage there. So I'll leave the demos there for today. And I think I'll jump back to my slides. Okay, and jump back to here. Okay, so just to give a bit of summary here. So as you've seen, I've shown a way that we can use GitHub Copilot that isn't just for the developers. So AI tools can help us in multiple ways, and it's really all about the approach that you have when you're using those tools and having that understanding of how the tools work. As the tools grow, we will see more features come out and more abilities. So as I said, the Azure CLI tool is really good for this, where it's now, rather than needing an IDE like Visual Studio Code, you can start to call this directly from your terminal. And again, these tools are co-pilots. They're not here to automate your job away. They're here to give you assistance, to help you learn, to help you speed up, and to essentially make you so that you spend time on the more challenging problems, the ones that people really enjoy working on, where it's I have to integrate a whole heap of things together, or I have to build these things that I don't have to worry about what is in kind of your base templates and your boilerplates and things like that. Cool. So I guess I'll leave it open if there's any questions that will probably up.
Thank you so much, Dylan. That was awesome. Really appreciate the demo. I really loved it. I was talking to Marcel in the backstage. The demo was really cool. I do see the value in GitHub Copilot, and I see how you interacted with it really as a Copilot. So that is really beautiful. So like you're nudging it the right way. You ask it questions. You keep on like having, like you said, for example, things in mind, the cutoff, the knowledge cutoff. So that was really cool. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, mate.
Yep. No,
Yeah. So like, I know that you also actually do a lot of Twitch, and so what is your handle, or like so that we'll keep it for.
Yeah. So I'm currently actually going through a bit of a rebrand. So I'm now going by the name Dylan DevX on
Beautiful.
Twitch. I'll also be starting to stream on YouTube simultaneously, so make it a bit
Nice.
more accessible, because Twitch can be, as a gaming platform, could be a bit intimidating sometimes. You have to sign up things, but most people have YouTube, so I'll make it a bit easier. And yeah, I really show off using this tool in a day-to-day capacity when I'm streaming. So again, that demo that I did, nothing there was pre-recorded. You saw there were blank files. Completely at the mercy of the AI if it decides to work with me today or not. But that's the reality of what it's like working with them, and it's very important that we show what these tools are like in a day-to-day sense, not just in a curated demo. So
I
I'm
agree.
hoping everyone got something out of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's actually one thing that I see a lot of value in it, because you are going through troubleshooting, like asking the question, nudging it the right way, and then, like I said, you don't expect what the AI would come back with. So that's really cool, and I see a lot of value in showing, like you said, everybody, not just developers, the value of Copilot, and then the right way to actually work with it. So that is super cool. We really appreciate your time here today and joining us, Dylan, from Melbourne, Australia. Is that right?
Yep, Melbourne, Australia,
Yes.
and about to run off to do another session later at the Melbourne boot camp as well. So
Beautiful.
getting
Good job.
all the
Great.
speaking done today.
Good on
Right.
you, mate. Good on you, mate. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Yeah.
no
Okay,
problem.
cool.
Thank you for having me.
See you, mate.